Thank you, everybody, for joining us in our YouTube channel. This is yet another video of us discussing Canadian immigration. With me today is Megan Tuck, Senior Partner, Canada Startup Company. And so, Megan, what's our topic of discussion today?
So today's topic of discussion is a very interesting one. There's been a lot of news. We've got a previous statement from August 25th, 2022 about the use of AI in Canadian immigration processing. And if you've been keeping up to date, there's lots of articles all over the Canadian immigration world of what this AI has been used for, what it's going to be used for, and whether or not innocent people and families are actually being hurt by the use of AI for no reason.
We've noticed that significantly too, because sometimes the AI engine is turned on, it moves the applications really rapidly, and sometimes it causes some funny discrepancies, which we'll talk more about today. So you'll see particular instances where we found out that AI was being used, and how did we mitigate it, right? How did we make sure that our applications bypass the AI engine? And the NCIC conference, right? Both of us came back from the National Citizenship and Immigration Conference, and this year's key topic was artificial intelligence.
Yep. Technology, AI, innovation in immigration, what it means, what we can use, what can be used now, and what will eventually be used in the future, right? And I think that's a really nice segue, Ajay, into your background. You've worked with AI a lot. You have a background in software development. So talk to us. AI is thrown around everywhere now. What is AI?
Okay, so AI is basically at the bottom of it mathematical equations that understand how to process something, simple math equations that understand how to process something, and then you refine that process and refine that process even further to a point that you can get an answer out of it. Okay, not very different than how human brain works. So how your brain works is when you take a signal in, you're basically getting electrical stimulation going to your brain. Okay, your brain cannot see light coming in. What your brain sees is only a string of zeros and ones, if you call it that way, although it's not binary in nature, but it gets electrical stimulation coming from your eye into your brain, and it has to paint the entire picture. It has to paint the colors with it. It has to do everything with it.
Yeah,
right?
So it basically takes a sensory input,
Yes.
jumbles it around, and makes sense of it in our brain, and that's when we perceive something to be true.
Exactly. And the way it gets trained is that you have a lot of these neurons. They keep getting sensory input, and then there's an output, and the output gets validated, right? And that's the key aspect of it, right? Once that gets validated, then these neurons strengthen the connections. So it's saying, if I got more ones going through this route and less going through this route, then that means A, right?
Right.
Something else means B, something else means C, right? And
Learned behavior.
Learned behavior, right? And you extrapolated more and more and more over to hundreds of millions and billions of neurons, and then all of a sudden it starts looking as if it's intelligent, right?
Yes.
And that's how life behaves, right? An earthworm has X amount of intelligence too. It needs to know how to survive, how to burrow itself, how to replicate. It knows that, right? So there's good amount of intelligence there as well. But human beings have a very different level of intelligence. The only thing different is the amount of neurons, the volume of neurons available. So as we did simpler stuff earlier, those were called business rules engines. Those were called analytical engines, right? That's what was done in the 2000s, the 2010s. Okay. Now we extrapolated it, we segmented the algorithms. We had RNNs, CNNs. Now we have large language models based on something called transformer architecture. And all we did was we streamlined the algorithms a little bit, but we expanded the compute a lot.
Right. Okay.
Right.
So what you're saying then, if I'm going to break it down to being a very easy digestible example, it's I can touch an element of a stove like this many times, but it won't be that time where I hold my finger a little bit longer where I'd get burnt and my brain would go, I'm not doing that again.
I'm not doing that again.
Right.
Yes.
And then you're saying when things get bigger and bigger and the computational power gets bigger, it would be me then having children and saying, hey, you can do this, but you don't hold your finger too long, you're going to get burnt. And that's passing it on.
The passing it on happens in binary bits or electronics, right? Because they can pass on knowledge. Okay. We as humans don't pass on as much knowledge. We still do a significant amount of knowledge that gets passed through our DNA, but every kid has to burn their finger to learn. It's
Yeah.
not a behavior that they can inherit. But in case of computer science, a lot of that behavior can be inherited. So, what you're going to see in the next few years is you're going to have platform level modules. Okay. And
Okay.
I'll take a step back and walk through the history. So you realize that the first time a computer was made, everything was made from scratch,
Yes.
right? And then very soon they said, hey, we're going to make the operating system level, right? And that's a separate layer. Now, not everybody writes the operating system. Microsoft does it, Apple does it, Linux does it. The three main operating system flavors. Everybody uses one of those three flavors,
Yes.
right? Below the operating system sits something called the BIOS, the basic input output system, right? That's what bootloads the machine. So you see how software became layered by layered by layered by layered. What's going to happen in the next 5-7 years is we're going to have these layers of artificial intelligence available as ready to use software modules. They're nothing different than software, right? You could write a very complex algorithm and it could do perhaps as good of a job on most of the things as AI would. Now, the thing where AI shines is when you have millions of input, then at that point, it's beyond human computational ability to even write the algorithm,
Right. Okay.
right? Let's say you're looking at a CT scan, right? And I gotta ask you to diagnose where is the cancer, right? As a human being, you can, as a radiologist, you can look at it and you can say, here I can see cancer, right? Now I give you the whole thing as zeros and ones because that's what it is. It's black and white, right? So it's actually worse than zeros and ones. Every small pixel, there could be 10 million pixels here. Every small pixel is made out of 8 bits of gradient saying how much gray it is, how much black or white it is, right? So you can imagine so much of data, right? Now, if I streamline this data into an algorithm, it's difficult for me to a little bit process it, right? It's just way too much data for me to get my mind around it. But AI, because of the computational ability, is able to take all of that data and train on it and train on it and train on it. You give it a million different scans and you tell it these ones were correct and these ones were wrong, and it gets trained on it and starts spitting out.
So what you're saying is, in order to use AI, one, you have to train it, but two, you have to recognize what it is it's trying
to...
The
feedback loop, yes.
Yeah, the feedback loop, if that's the term, right? So if I'm going to continue on your example about the cancers, you'd have to say if there's 8 levels of gradient, you'd have to say, I don't know, 0 to 5 is non-cancerous and 6, 7, 8 is cancerous. So if you detect
Absolutely.
6, 7, 8, you output cancerous area, and 0 to 5.
So there were a lot of algorithms done beforehand, and when humans were doing algorithms, what they were detecting were the boundaries, and they were saying how much of a gradient shift is it happening, right? Then is the mass isolated and much different than anything else? So there were a few different strategies that they were using to figure that out. Now, when AI came into picture, then you don't have to write the software. Then it trains itself.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the beauty of it. The large language models that ChatGPT is using, which everybody's talking about, it does not need to be trained specifically on law content separately and medical content separately, all of that. No, it's a language model. It understands all of that. But it does require $1 billion of compute to run it, right?
Yeah.
Now, what Google is coming up with, which is BART, has much higher amount of tokens that you could work with. So ChatGPT, if you guys have all been using it, it's 4K tokens. Now the newer ChatGPT that came out is 32K tokens. So 32,000 tokens can be processed at one go, right? What Google's going to come in next, or they're talking about, which is their BART system, system, is 1 million tokens.
Okay.
Right? So almost.
So what does that mean?
What that means,
right?
A very good question. What that means is, you remember when you used to use a RAM or a storage device that only had X amount of kilobytes?
Yes.
Right? And then it became megabytes and then gigabytes, and now we're talking terabytes.
Yes.
Okay. Same as with tokens. Tokens is the amount of information you can take in and take out and process in one go.
So, for example, if I were to say to ChatGPT, plan me a trip to wherever, right, whatever destination, you're saying it can only pull information from so many sources at once? Is that the understanding?
It'll pull all that information that it has in its model, but in its RAM, in its current memory, it's working with only those many tokens.
Okay, so there's capacity of what it can put
what
in
it can process in one time.
At one time. Okay,
right?
understood.
So very similar to random access memory. So when you're looking at RAM, you realize sometimes when your computer is maxed out on RAM, it just works very, very slowly. It doesn't do as much, and then crashes and burns very often, right?
Yes.
So as your memory gets expanded, you can put more variables that can be used for that computation.
Okay.
So you can use simpler programs if your RAM is low, right? But if you're using a complex program that has a lot of variables to be kept randomly for access, then that's random access memory. So that's very similar to the tokenization concept where you go ahead and say, I can process X amount of tokens in one go. The more tokens you can process, the more you can work with in one go. That's what's on your working table, right? Okay. So you could have a separate shelf which can have a lot of stuff there, right? So that's your deep freezer. You can have a lot of stuff there and you can access that. But if I give you a very small table and I ask you to cook a 7-course meal, you're gonna say, I don't have enough prep space to cook a 7-course meal, right?
Right.
But the moment I expand the prep table, remember that refrigerator is already there. You can pull in more, you can prep more, you can put a better meal out there.
Okay, so then Ajay, I have one crucial question then. So if IRCC needs to be able to, one, train their AI, then it needs to have an aspect of familiarity. And my question, let's pretend I'm a client. If my application's unique and I get every applicant under one stream or one program would fill out the same program and ideally provide the same documents. But how does that uniqueness in each application, how does IRCC train artificial intelligence to deal with that uniqueness amongst all of the similarity?
Absolutely. So, there are two questions here. One is a hidden question, which basically is saying, should we do it or not?
Should we do it or not?
Because the second question is, given all this complexity, how do we do it? But underlying premises, should we do it or not? So we're all moving towards a world of singularity, okay? By 2030, we should expect AGI, artificial general intelligence, to be big enough, strong enough, that it could literally do every function that a human being is doing, but just much better than a human being.
Mm-hmm. So they'd be correct 100% of the time.
The correction ratio would never be 100 because 100 is almost an unachievable target. It almost goes to the minority report prophecy, but because if you are intervening and catching a crime early enough, then how is somebody to be sure that the crime was actually going to be committed? Right?
Exactly.
So you could always say that we're 100%, but what's to prove you wrong that you're not 100%, right? So I would say that a reasonable target for AI to be right would be close to 99.8% or so. Okay. A parallel, I always like to see parallels. I always like to see history. So a parallel as a relative to that industry is the server industry, right? Where servers and the server architecture has something called 5 nines, 4 nines, 6 nines as the uptime requirements, right? So when you go to Amazon because it's a very reliable cloud. Why is it a very reliable cloud? Because they go ahead and say, we have a 5-9 availability or 6-9 availability, right? Which means they're available 99.9999, so 5 nines, right?
Okay.
Percentage of time. So I think the key with AI would be to start with like a 3-9 or 4-9 approach. So it's 99.9% there, right? And then from there on to slowly, incrementally get better, right? It's very difficult to get the last few bits better, right? But imagine Google brought us into a world which was information at your fingertips, right? Now AI is taking us into a world which is knowledge at your fingertips. So it will have all the assimilated knowledge of humankind available for it in its algorithms and in its compute. So its probability of being right would be much higher than the probability of a human being being right?
So then, based on that statement, to me it sounds like, yes, using AI, if used correctly, is actually a good idea for Canadian immigration processing.
It's a good idea for everybody, right?
Okay.
Today,
so why?
Today, the most inefficient form of anything on this planet is government.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right? So everything else is far more efficient than government, right? And I think that that entire industry, and that's not a recognition that's with me or with our clients. That's something that the government itself realizes.
Yeah, right? They know they're behind.
They know that they're very big. They know that they're very inefficient, and if we put ourselves in their shoes, we realize how difficult it is to run a country. God damn, it's so difficult to run an organization, a company. It's so difficult to run a country, right? So it's very difficult a thing to do. but it's the thing that will benefit the most out of AGI, any kind of artificial intelligence, right? So I ask my clients, right, if you have your application processed in 5 minutes versus 5 years, what do you prefer, right? The average time frame for a PR application processing under some of the business programs could be 2 to 3 years, 4 years,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And we know that certain QIIP applications were stuck for 4 years, and the money stuck with the government too, right? Which is the Quebec Investor Program, and certain EB5 applications were the same, right? So you get a huge amount of money stuck. Would you not prefer that somebody gives you a response in 4 days, 5 days? Right? Now, can anybody process 5 million applications in 4 days, 5 days? No, they can't. You need systems support to be able to do it.
Yeah.
Right? And as we understand, AI is another evolution of something that we were doing as business rules and business processes, right? So I, for one, would want my government to be on the cutting edge, right? Let them push around, let them experiment and figure out new products that can help us, but just have a fallback mechanism, right?
Right.
Have an evaluation mechanism on their part where they go ahead and say, hey, listen, we ran it through the system, right? Let's still do a sanity check. Right? The system can also spit out its confidence percentages, right? More often than not, it does, right? It goes ahead and says, this is my confidence percentage on this, right? And then you look through those confidence percentages and say, anything that it's 95% plus confident, shoot it out to the clients. Anything that it's 80 plus percentage confidence, move it over to an officer to review it. Anything less than 80% confidence, reject its results, send it to an officer to do a full-on appraisal, right?
Okay,
that would be...
But Ajay, so then based on what you're saying, is you're acknowledging that IRCC can use artificial intelligence and that they are in fact using it to process cases, whether or not an officer looks at it afterwards or not. What's your opinion? I know we don't know, but what's your opinion on...
I mean, to some extent we know, right? But to some extent we can't talk about the fact that we know. So the fact is that there's very little... there's a difficult layer to prove between AI and advanced business algorithms, right?
Okay.
So if they're using advanced business algorithms to validate something or vet something, and some part of it could be AI, right? For example, we on our part, when we run our code, we're basically going ahead and saying, at this stage, we need these documents from the client. These documents have to be within these parameters. But at the same time, the last object where we're scanning the passport and we're pulling information out of that passport, that piece of the code is AI.
Yes.
Right? Why is it AI? Could we code that into an OCR engine? OCR stands for optical character recognition. We could. But it's too much hand coding, too much of work, and every time something changes, you have to change it. In AI, it's very simple. You just put a lot of data and train it, tell it what's right and what's wrong. And
so you would put in, say, 1 million Indian passports, 1 million Pakistani passports, and AI would flag then, this feature doesn't exist on most, this feature doesn't, and that's how you, or I guess AI would ultimately train, but then spit out, in this case, artificial documents.
So it could do 2-3 things for you. Number one, it could recognize the date of births and date of expiries and all of that stuff from the documents and match them against what's filled in on forms. The second thing it can do is obviously detect which document looks like it's doctored or tailored or synthetic in some nature, shape, or form.
So then AI can pull text from an image, from a scan of a passport, and then match it against text in a PDF, for example.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And do you think they're doing it?
So, I let me put it this way. If they're not doing it, they're hurting themselves. They should be doing it.
They should be doing it.
Right? It's better for everybody. The only thing that it's not better for, I should say that also with a pinch of salt, because I was going to say the only people who it's not better for is perhaps the lawyers, but it's actually good for them too. They get to bring more lawsuits around it. Right?
Yeah.
So I think it's evolution of an industry, it's evolution of technology, it's evolution of human beings. I think everybody should be moving forward, not moving backwards. Would we have some naysayers? Would we have some people who would get out there and say, no, you shouldn't be doing it, you shouldn't be doing that? Would it happen that it's very difficult to prove how an AI came to a result?
Right.
Sometimes it's very difficult for humans to prove that too, right? You ask somebody, why did you say that? They're like, I felt that and I said that, right? Or
it just came out.
Yeah, it just came out, right? Or that was my gut feel. What is your gut feel? That's a trained response to something, right?
Right.
So I think that's going to happen quite a lot with systems, and because IRCC stands for Immigration, Refugee, Citizenship Canada, the department that actually handles immigration, because they will be unable to prove this in court of law. So their goal will be to hold it as much back as possible, to continuously tell you that our systems are black box and we're just doing this, we're not doing anything more.
Yeah.
And that will be their way of saying, let's not get caught in unnecessary lawsuits.
Yeah.
Right.
And so Ajay, here's a good question, right? So let's say IRCC is using artificial intelligence to the full extent that we've talked about, whether they are or not, but let's assume they are.
I don't think that they're using it to the full extent at this point, because AI is evolutionary in nature, and also requires a lot of training resources, a lot of compute resources, and their budgets are constrained, and a lot of their budgets actually go on human resources and offices and all that stuff. So
which is a cycle of need people to process, but
need more people to manage those people,
and then need the budget to actually develop the AI. So you're stuck in that cycle, which I'm sure we're going to see a lot of corporations, governments getting stuck in that.
Exactly.
But I want to emphasize this example. So let's say IRCC is using it. Just make the assumption in this case that they are using it to the extent that they could, right? Then IRCC is expecting, bucket one, passport, bucket two, maybe resume, whatever it's going to be, forms, and the application has to kind of go in, okay, passport to passport, form to form.
Have you seen the PR engine? That's what the PR portal exactly
is. That's what the PR portal is, right? But then what do you do about the fact that the people submitting the applications, right, whether it's a client, whether it's an RCIC, whether it's a lawyer, aren't using AI, right? Or at least not yet. It's not.
If they're, they have to be dumb to not use AI. I mean, we are pushing every boundary in technology, and I think everybody should be, right? Yeah. So if you're a client and you're working with somebody.
But today, right, they're not. So let's say IRCC is using it and the people are not. Then according to what you think, and if you were planning this for IRCC, what would you say the feedback mechanism would be if the application is 99.9% perfect, or 95, it's missing a signature, or a name, because they've typed it, is spelled, 2 letters are interchanged. Does AI have a way of saying it's almost correct and sending it back and saying we believe there might be a human error? Or is it just, flat out not right, refused? Like, how do you handle something like that?
Firstly, that signature thing was a low ball attack, okay? Because you remember my application. So for people who do not know, I filed my application some 15 years ago, and I did everything perfect, and but forgot to sign on the application. Back then it was all paper-based process, so IRCC was kind enough, they packaged my application back in an envelope, sent it to me with stickers saying sign here and send back. So yes, so there could be human, understand that the best use for an AI engine is to give you a percentage probability score.
Okay.
Right? That's the thing that it should be doing, right? Can it, as they say in military, can it take the final shot to it? Can, right? But you don't prefer for it to do that right now because you do not have the 4 nines, 5 nines reliability. You would prefer for it to do that when you have that reliability. Now, because IRCC is government and can be questioned and will be questioned, right? Yeah. There's no reason to believe that they will not be dragged into court, dragged through all the mud to do that.
Right.
So I think it's also important for them to cover their ass on everything that they're doing, right? Yeah. Which means they have to be very particular about how our engine is generating an output. I think if I was IRCC, I would be more rules-based and rules-driven, a business rules-based engine, and I would be using small portions of AI technology, which is just feeding into the rules engine.
Right.
That would be the architecture that's the most defensible and gets the most done for the department, right? There's no point having an overarching AI architecture that spits out everything, right? Now, could you use a slightly more self-driven architecture for a simpler application like visitor visa applications? You could.
Yeah.
Right? So because you get them by the millions, you can process them really fast by the millions.
So in a confidence score, let's say it comes back 95% confident, but then it could also provide feedback of form 1, box 14, not filled, or error, whatever it would spit out, right? Empty. I don't know. You would know the error.
Yeah, I mean, this is how you program the engine, and that would be your rules-based engine, right? So you have so every AI works when the data is cleaned up before.
Right, but then, hold on, if it spits back, then there would have to be some mechanism of saying, if 4 documents aren't included, then like there should be a way to keep the same application until it's fully complete, and then at that point the acceptance or the rejection decision is made, right? Like a lot of the times what we're seeing now with IRCC, they just refuse off of, signature missing or one form missing, when really it could come back, circle back, be complete, and then the decision's made.
So, what I'm noticing in my practice now is that a lot of these things have been taken care of because of the portals.
Yes.
So incomplete applications are not getting in as much. Where we notice the flaws is, for example, there's a big, massive, red, big glaring hole flaw where the authorized rep portal is not as advanced as the permanent residence portal. So the authorized rep portal basically says, when you're doing a work permit application, you can upload these 7-8 documents, right? But at the same time, for example, I'm doing an SUV application, which is an A77 code. In that application, they now have a May 23rd new regulation on that particular code. So May 23rd, that code got updated to now go ahead and say I need R205A compliance and I need R200.1 compliance to be required there. Now, those two compliances mean that I need to have the business plan and the justification on that business plan, but there's no place to attach it, right? The R200 compliance means that I need to attach the biography of this person and how the new job requirement and what knock codes and all of that stuff. I don't have a separate space to attach it, right?
Right.
So,
well, and that comes back to the portals are a way to process. It's not an instruction manual. Right?
And I think that's where they need a unified architecture, which they're missing at this point, where the laws are created distinct from the execution of the laws, right? And the systems architect in me, the software architect in me thinks that there's more of a unified architecture required there. But coming back to how it helps or hurts my clients, we can sometimes see that the rejections may happen because of Chinook, which is the engine that's used in the background, and we are able to then mitigate that. So we are able to address that in an application in a manner enough that the system knows that we are aware of its existing and we are requesting a manual review of it, right?
Yeah.
So at that point, that's an override built into the system, so it moves over to an officer for assessment, right?
So what does one of those cases look like, Ajay? Like, how do you know that an officer's decision or a case decision was either manually made by an
officer? One of the cases that you were talking about, right, where the entire family is approved and a single child in that family under the age of 16 has been denied.
Yeah, and there's no reason for that.
There's no reason for that denial, right? It just, the reason is that that child was eligible for a student visa application, which went through an AI engine for processing, and everybody else was part of the startup visa program, which was a manual officer decision, right?
Right.
So you could see stuff like that, which again is an architecture issue because those applications should be combined and processed together. But I'm noticing a lot of times that I'm getting the spousal work permit decision before the original work permit decision. So a dependent's file is getting processed before the other person's file. So
which it doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense, right? And to some extent, to be honest, it makes sense too, because when you're doing a principal applicant's file, you want to make sure that all the dependents under that principal applicant are eligible as well. Right? If they're not eligible, then the principal applicant becomes ineligible. So there's a little bit of feedback cycle loop within an application.
It needs to kind of go like this, and then like this, and then go forward.
Yes. But I think that this and this is not fully.
There's none. Yeah, it's not in the system.
Yeah, it's not fully in the system.
Yeah.
But summarize this thing. I think I'm happy that they're moving towards more automation. They're moving towards more AI because that'll make it cheaper, better, and faster to process. At the end of the day, for every client, it'll be more equitable as well.
I was going to say it would potentially reduce biases and corruption.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So no more of, I know somebody's uncle who has some special jack there, which nobody does.
Yeah.
But everybody claims to. So that's that would be out of the picture completely. Also, today the best officers may be a lot better than the new coming officers that the department's hiring, but having an engine trained which can then pass on its knowledge to the next generation engine and the next generation engine, and there's a mechanism of inheritance and longevity there, So that really, I think would be great and helpful to make sure that we're on track, right?
And I mean, based on our hiring and training experience, I don't even blame IRCC for not being able to adequately and quickly get new officers up to speed. Right, in multiple programs, multiple regulations, changing regulations, and then you're looking at one form has its own requirements that are different than this form, that are different than this document, and you have to manually see if the IELTS test is still valid. Well, you're looking at how the resume and biography link back to the immigration forms. Like, that's a lot of complexity for one person in one program, and some of these officers handle all economic immigration.
Yes.
So sometimes when they make these decisions, I mean, how can you blame the officer or IRCC? It's very hard to get a new person up to speed of someone that's working in immigration for 20 plus years.
I think also one of the things that IRCC does pretty smart is that they have a graduation mechanism for the officers to take on more complexity. So usually newcoming officers take very simple, less complexity cases.
Yeah.
And the complex cases are reserved for people who have the expertise and the background to look at those cases.
Absolutely. And I think with that said, we've wrapped up AI. Its potential, what's kind of being done now, and what it can be used for down the road. Any final comments on AI and what we can do with it?
I think it's an exciting future that we're walking into.
Right.
Most people are scared of it. But I think most people were scared of it even when computers were coming out. They were saying computers are going to eat up all our jobs. The only thing that they did was they created more jobs.
Yep.
Right. So I think my perception is same is going to happen with AI. It's going to create more opportunities, right? We have to take what's called a blue sky approach. We have to think what happens 20, 30 years down the line when we've automated X amount of work that was already there, right? Earlier we had farming. Everybody was engaged in farming. We automated farming to an extent, brought industrial revolution. There were so many hands available to build stuff. We automated industries using robotics, brought the white collar revolution, right? We're all doing knowledge work now. Now we're innovating knowledge, or we're automating knowledge. Now we will get into an innovation economy. All of us will be creating new things. We'll be innovating, and we'll have all this support available to us.
And managing, right? We've got to manage the information going into it. We've got, like you always talk, there's going to be new positions in AI prompting.
Prompt engineer is already a new position now, right?
Prompt engineer, testers, and then from experience, somebody needs to feed.
And everything needs to evolve, right? So what happens is, if we were all stuck in farming, right? Let's assume we were all stuck in farming. There'll be no YouTube. You guys will not be watching this. Right? That only happened when there was X amount of evolution, right? Next step that you took. So, and every step, if you notice, is because of necessity. We don't take steps as human beings because it's going to be a cool idea. We take because there's nothing left there. Right? We only move forward because of necessity. So, what will happen next is, as we have a lot of white collar jobs, there'll be a whole set of jobs opening up. Will there be some pain? Transition always comes with pain, right? But there will be next set of jobs that will open up, which will say space exploration, quantum physics exploration, right? Nanoparticles, life extension, right? I mean, if you look at it, there are at least 20 big industries out there glaring in our face, ready for people to take on those challenges, right? What does an advanced civilization look like? It's a multi-planet civilization.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing that necessity, like even in our own hiring practices, right? People want more free time. They want things to happen quickly. They want work-life balance. And the only way we're going to get there is through automation of a lot of the things we don't need to be doing.
Absolutely.
Right.
And it needs to be passion-driven.
Yeah.
Right? Instead of pension-driven. So, I remember a very long time back when I was just getting into the job market, I met a guy who was really, really very aware of what he wanted in life. And he said, there are two things you can do, Ajay, in life. You can either work for your pension or your passion, right? And at that point, I chose that computers were my passion, and I always wanted to work in that. And I always find that after a while, if I've stalled in a particular industry, I go and find what I'm very passionate about. and that helps me bring my 100% to that. So I think what's going to happen is still we have a lot of work in this world, which is very pension driven, right?
Yes.
And you get to a job because you need to do
You
that
need the
job to
job.
pay the rent, right? So that that's not long-term pension, that's short-term pension
Yeah.
driven, right? I think what we're going to notice is that our colleges and universities would change to evoke more passion in us, right? Our industries would change to make people more passionate, right? Today you spend a lot more time teaching people what to do rather than getting the passion evoked in it, right?
And we even see that, right? You graduate high school and they go get a high paying job, go get a degree that will help you get a high paying job. Nobody actually asks you, hey, what do you like to do?
Absolutely.
Right? What do you want to do? What
Yes.
do you read about? What kind of movies do you watch? Like that's all linked to
Nobody
somebody's
does.
passion. Nobody asks, what is your thing?
What is your
Right?
thing? Which is the ikagai, right? So, which is
Yeah.
the summarization of what you're good at, or which is the intersection of the 3-4 circles of what you're good
Exactly.
at, what somebody would pay you to do, and what you are naturally wanting to do, right? Where your heart lies.
And I think one of the worst things that schools do is actually pushes people into further education or into a job without letting you explore first. Right?
Yes.
Like a lot of people do a degree, they get into second, third year and say, I hate this. What a waste of money, what a waste of time. You know what I mean? Why not go out, explore, fail, try a few things? But our current world doesn't support that, right? It's
Yes.
go chase the money in whatever degree and then whatever job
Exactly.
that you see yourself in.
Exactly. Very, very pension driven, right? Like it's all about, and most people forget, and this could be a great thing for another episode. Most people forget that money itself is a fictional notion, right? It's some banker
Yeah.
sitting somewhere and pressing some keystrokes to make everybody else in the world run around. So you need X amount of it for a comfortable life. But
Yeah.
I think if you find your passion, which is your ikagai, right? If you find the unison of those 3 circles, then you find really something that you can happily focus your life towards. And I think that will happen more in the future.
I think that's one thing
Right.
that the one area where schools are doing well. And I mean, it's been a while since I've been in elementary or high school, but is field trips. I know they seem like, oh, just a fun day off, but no, you're going into usually places of employment. They take you to a science lab or they take you, into a space
And I think
facility.
that would be a great
Like,
conversation for another
it would be a
episode.
great conversation about the future of education and what the
Exactly.
country looks like. But I think
I
that's
think we
where we're
should do an
seeing.
entire series on how AI would revolutionize the next few industries, right? Like
Yes.
we know every industry was touched by computers, and we know every industry would be touched by AI. And at that note, I think we
I
should
think we should wrap it up.
we should wrap it up today.
Yeah.
So, thank you everybody for being here, for watching our episodes. Please like and comment below. Let us know your questions. We're very focused on answering each and every one of your questions. So if we are aware of what you're looking at, what you think we're missing, what you think you want to hear about, we'll bring that content over to you. To summarize, I think AI is a good thing as long as the people that you're working with know when it's negatively impacted your application,
Yeah.
and when they can override that negative impact and they can get you success. So I think that's important to know. It's you shouldn't be you
We're
shouldn't
like
be
those
negatively
organizations.
impacted.
Have you been physically harmed by AI processing? Call us, right?
Call us, yes.
Yeah, but anyways, with that said, thank you so much for watching today, and we'll look forward to hearing from you next time.
Take care. Bye.